I'm
a brother,
a sister,
a friend, a daughter.
We are all kids.
I'm proud of who I am. Right now, I kinda just want to be a kid. Don't get me wrong, I think it's pretty neat being different.
It doesn't mean your jokes don't hurt.
So the next time a substitute teacher says my name wrong, cut some slack, will ya?
The next time my lunch seems funny, be cool about it, okay?
Give me a break.
Remember immigrants,
Minorities,
Refugees,
are kids too. I'm a kid named Ashley, Kayla,
done.
Perea.
Let's stand together.
Brought to you by the Indian Race Relations Foundation and others.
What is behind the racial inequalities in our education system? Join us for a webinar on systemic disparities in education for Blacks and other students of color. Panelists, Dr. George Sefa Day, renowned educator, researcher, and author. Kathy McDonald, Trustee, Peel District School Board. Warren Salmon, President, Ontario Alliance of Black School Educators and CEO of First Fridays in Canada. Moderated by Iyanu Akinrinola, educator and community advocate. This is a part of the Community Resilience Program. Visit us at transformationinstitute.ca.
Good evening. My name is Patricia Baby Amawa, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to the 5th program in the Community Resilience Webinar Series, an initiative of the Transformation Institute for Leadership and Innovation. During the program, we've discussed many topics like thriving in turbulent times, how to build a culture of resilience, managing your business and finances during disruptive times, the impact of COVID-19, navigating current and future mental health challenges, as well as the pillars of health during a pandemic. Now, if you miss any of these events, do visit the Transformation Institute and Afro Global Television, YouTube, and Facebook pages to watch them. Nelson Mandela once said that the most powerful weapon that we can use to change the world is education. And as we know, education is not just vital in skill development, but leads to socioeconomic success. That is why today we are discussing systemic disparities in education for Blacks and other students of color. I can't wait to hear what the panelists have to say. But before we get started, I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's event. She's an educator with a master's degree in digital technology and education. As a member of the staff program team with the Alliance of Educators for Black Students, AEBS, and the education team within the organization, Parents of Black Children, POBC, she works with fellow team members to access, educate, and develop program strategies to address systemic issues that Black students, staff, and families face. In her spare time, she works with various global organizations focused on community development and education. Our moderator is Iyanu Akinrinola. Welcome, Iyanu.
Thank you so much, Patricia. It is an honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And good evening to everybody. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you're joining us from today. We are so grateful to have you with us as we'll be discussing systemic disparities in education for Black students and other students of color. But before we jump in, I should say, I would first like to say a land acknowledgement because this is pivotal to the discussion we are having tonight. So please just let's take a moment of silence if you may, as I read out our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the lands we're meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewas, the Haudenosaunees, and the Wendat people, and is still home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on this land. Now, to cover a few housekeeping tips. We have quite a packed event for you this evening, and I am very excited to jump in. But before we do, I want to make mention of a few things that will enable you to engage with us tonight. Tonight's webinar is being recorded and televised, and after we're done this session, we will make it accessible to you through the Transformation Institute Facebook page or an Afro Global Television. Now, if you would like to hear or listen to the past webinars, as Patricia mentioned in the introduction, you can find it on the Transformation Institute Facebook page. Please share it with your colleagues, with your network, because these were very powerful topics that are affecting the Black community today. But before we get into all of it, we are going to play 2 videos, and one of the videos is a message from our mayor, our Toronto mayor, John Tory, on Black History Month. And after that, we'll be watching a short bio video on the president of the Transformation Institute for Leadership and Innovation and the CEO of Afro Global Television and Silver Trust Media. And dare I say, the mastermind behind this powerful program, none other than Moses A. Marwa. So please watch the video, and then Moses will say a few words.
Hello, I'm Mayor John Tory, and I'm proud to recognize and celebrate February as Black History Month in the City of Toronto. This Black History Month feels a bit different than the ones we've celebrated before. The past few months have not been easy for Black Torontonians. We've witnessed horrific incidents of anti-Black racism abroad as well as here at home, which is why acknowledging this month is more important than ever. COVID-19 has heightened the existing social and economic inequities that exist within our city and within marginalized groups in our city. And I know that the overwhelming sense of grief and frustration and pain felt during the summer of 2020 continued to burden the hearts and minds of far too many. There is no denying that the current times have been challenging, and yet we continue to see demonstrations of strength and of ingenuity and creativity and resilience and resistance from Black Torontonians. In the last year, we've seen tens of thousands of people who took to the streets to call for the end of anti-Black racism, a movement that was strong across the world and that covered a very wide consensus of our population. And we've also seen many community leaders who've amplified the voices of marginalized and vulnerable among Black communities. In response, much has been done and accomplished, but so much more needs to be done, and this has only inspired us to do more. And we are committed to doing so. I encourage non-Black Torontonians to learn more about anti-Black racism, the many ways in which it hinders the lives and the health and the overall well-being of Black Torontonians, and more importantly, learn ways for you to also take part in the fight against it and to be a better ally. As mayor, I remain resolute and firm on my commitment to tackling anti-Black racism within our institutions and our society. This is a critical part of how I honor the history of Black Torontonians and Black Canadians. Anti-Black racism and racism in general has no place in our city. All of these Heritage Months are about us getting to know more about each other. This is a must in the most diverse city in the world, because history shapes who we are, for all of us. It offers us help in ensuring we can support each other and, depending on the circumstances and experiences we've had, adjust and make changes to that kind of support. It teaches us about the good that we want to see repeated and the bad we don't ever want to see happen again. And so to our Black Torontonians, happy Black History Month. And to those Torontonians who are not Black, please go online and participate. You will learn something, as I certainly have every single year during Black Heritage Month, and it will help us to continue to build a respectful, embracing city that is the envy of the world.
Moses A. Marwa is the president of Silver Trust, Afro Global Television, Destiny, and the Transformation Institute. He is the architect of business, media, ministry, and social innovation brands, including the Crossover Mentorship Program. Moses co-founded the Marcus Garvey Institute with Dr. Julius Garvey, son of the legendary Marcus Mosiah Garvey, and their associate, Michael Dawson. As a film and television executive, Moses has produced Synergy, Standing Ovation, The Minister, the Oma Bella drama series, and contents for other private and public sector establishments. His Excellence Awards initiative has honored Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s daughter, Bernice King, Bob Marley's wife, Rita Marley, Nobel laureate, Professor Wole Soyinka, Jamaica's first female Prime Minister, Portia Simpson Miller, South African music superstar, Yvonne Chaka Chaka, and others. The Transformation Program has awarded many Canadian leaders and innovators. publisher of Envision, Destiny, Legacy, Diversity, Excellence, and the Discover magazine series, Moses has authored the 150 Extraordinary Canadians Legacy book with his wife Patricia, the foreword by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. In 2016, Moses and his team launched Afro Global Television, a 24-hour super channel that informs, empowers, uplifts, and entertains with great programming. Moses received the York Regional Police Civic Leadership Award, Real World Visionary Award, the Harry Jerome Media Award, Toronto Police Community Service Award, and the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal. In 2013, CNN featured Moses and Patricia in a half-hour worldwide television broadcast, calling them the Power Couple. In 2019, Moses participated in the Royal Canadian Navy's leadership program. A proud husband and father, Moses holds a BA degree in film studies from Carleton University, among other achievements and honors.
Welcome to the Community Resilience Program, which is an initiative that's presented by the Transformation Institute for Leadership and Innovation. I'm so happy to have you all joining us for this much needed conversation. Over the last several weeks, we've had so many people across Canada joining us. And I've also had the pleasure of actually seeing people from overseas actually joining us as well. This is a part of the Community Resilience Program, which is actually a webinar series that is intended to enable us to overcome the challenges of COVID-19. But then even after the pandemic is over, for us to be able to bounce back better. It is actually sponsored and presented by the Transformation Institute for Leadership and Innovation, and by the Canadian Red Cross, and of course, the government of Canada that has actually supported this as well, Afro Global Television, and Silver Trust Media. For those who do not know, we actually run a 24-hour television network that's broadcast across this wonderful nation. It's on Rogers, Bell, TELUS, Eastlink, and a number of other platforms as well. And we also encourage you to really locate us on social media. We're on Facebook, on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, and some other locations online as well. I'm just gonna take a moment to speak briefly about the event next week. You have joined us today, but in this series, there's just one more function that I would really implore you to attend. That is going to be next week. It will be the 25th anniversary of Black History Month. We will be actually celebrating, in essence, the Silver Jubilee of the formal recognition of Black history in this nation. It's gonna be on then, now, and of course, the future as well. And honestly, we have a fantastic panel that will be joining us for that one as well. We will have Dr. Maulana Karenga, the founder of Kwanzaa. We have Dr. Gina Agustin, who was responsible for the recognition of February as Black History Month in Canada. We will have also Dr. Julius Garvey, the son of the legendary Marcus Mosiah Garvey, who will be joining us from New York. And we will also have Mayor John Tory joining us live, this time for a conversation. And we have the Honorable Minister Tony Ince, who is a minister in charge of the Public Service Commission and African Nova Scotian Affairs. For some of you who do not know, there's one provincial jurisdiction that have an entire ministry, an arm of government that's dedicated to the affairs of people of African descent. And he's actually the minister in charge, and that's in the province of Nova Scotia. And we'll also be having a good friend, Irene Moore-Davis, who will be the moderator. She's a historian and also works at St. Clair College, in the Windsor area. This is such a phenomenal series. I wish it could just keep on actually continuing. We've had a fantastic time with it. And, and I'm sure we'll be coming back to you with other initiatives that are similar as well. And finally, I'll just give you brief information about what the Transformation Institute is about. The vision of the Transformation Institute is to unlock the impact of good leadership and to accelerate positive change through innovation. The Transformation Institute for Leadership and Innovation has been established with the mission of improving the lives of individuals as well as collectively as well. The central tenet of our operational strategy for the Transformation Institute is to minimize cost and to maximize impact through collaboration, technology, and harnessing the power of our diversity. And just to let you know, we run the crossover mentorship program that is actually activated by the Transformation Institute. It is also about capacity building and putting forward programs that intended to advance sound leadership. It's about transforming lives for good through research and innovation. And we're also involved with advancing great values like harmony and cultural diversity. And we intend to also continue with maximizing the positive impact of citizens and, of course, immigrants as well. And finally, it's about accelerating performance by conferring fellowships and awards. So the Transformation Institute is here to stay and to make life better for us and for all those who are dear to us. Thank you so very much, and I ask you to share the word about what this is all about so that we can have more people participating as we go forward. All the best and have a good evening.
Let us meet our amazing panelists. I'm sure that's why you're here tonight. I am going to start off first with Dr. George Sefa Day. Now, Dr. Day, I was joking with him before we started. I feel that my mom is more excited to see him tonight than she is to see me. But Dr. Day is a Ghanaian-born, renowned educator, researcher, and writer who is considered by many as one of Canada's foremost scholars on race and anti-racism studies. He is widely sought after academically in the research field. Currently, Dr. Day is a professor of social justice education and the director of the Center for Integrated Anti-Racism Studies at OISE, which is the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education at the University of Toronto. In August of 2012, Dr. Day received the honorary title of Professor Extraordinaire from the Department of Inclusive Education at the University of South Africa. In 2017, he was elected as Fellow of Royal Society of Canada, which is the most prestigious award for any academic scholar. And Professor Day has, get this, 35 books and over 70 referred journal articles to his credit. My God, how do you write so many? And finally, and I think this is like the cherry on top of the proverbial cake. In June of 2007, Professor Day was installed as a traditional chief in Ghana, specifically as the Gyashihene of the town of Asokore, Kofi-Ridua in New Jubwen traditional area of Ghana, and his full name is Nana Adese Sefa Twenebwa. Professor Day, thank you so much for being with us this evening.
Thank you very much.
Next on our panel, we have Kathy McDonald. Now, Kathy is a longtime resident of Brampton. She began her 4-year term as trustee of Wards 3 and 4 in Brampton for the Peel District School Board. She was instrumental in the implementation of the We Rise Together Action Plan, which is the Peel District School Board strategy to support Black male students. She's a coordinator for the Community Youth Seal Band, a children's storyteller of Jamaican folktales, a member of the Congress of Black Women Brampton chapter, a member of the United Achievers Club. My goodness, Kathy, you are a superwoman. She was previously chair of the Caribbean Pavilion for Catabram, Brampton's multicultural festival, and Kathy holds a Bachelor of Science degree from McGill University and a postgraduate diploma in the theory of teaching practices from the University of Guelph. But now I think this is my favorite degree you hold, Kathy, because you say that you have a PhD from Mommy University as a dedicated mother of 4 change makers. Thank you so much for being with us this evening, Kathy.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. And last and definitely not least is Lauren Salmon. Warren is president of ONASB, which is the Ontario Alliance of Black School Educators, as well as the president of Blackboard International and First Fridays. Now, ONASB promotes and facilitates the education of all students, in particular African Canadian students, and identifies and develops African Canadian professionals who will assume leadership positions in education and influence public policy concerning the education of African Canadian people. But in 2019, Warren started First Fridays in Toronto, which is a monthly business and community networking event, particularly for Black Canadians. And Warren also founded Blackboard International Ashaware as a software company that provides educational resources with culturally inclusive content. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Warren.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. I am super excited to get started on this discussion, as you can see. I'm going to throw out this first question, and I'm going to first read a short excerpt from an article written called Beyond Heroes and Holidays before I pose this question. Enid Lee wrote in this article saying, as parents, teachers, school administrators, community members, and taxpayers, we are all aware of the school's role as an essential agent of knowledge, socialization, and acceptance in society. Canada is regarded as one of the world's leaders in education standards and resources. However, there is insufficient development in our education system in the areas of inclusiveness and empowerment of all children. Dr. Day, I'll call on you first. What are your thoughts on this statement?
I know we've done the long acknowledgement, but I also want to give a shout to our elders and our ancestors to join in this conversation. I want to start by noting that, in at least work, right, goes way, way back. Her work has offered as a comprehensive guide to educators in terms of the work that we want to do to transform our schools. But also, anti-racism has a long, long way to go. We have a long way to go. And over the years, people have been working at it. There's a long way to go because of the Eurocentric curriculum, the lack of curricular sophistication, the differential treatment by race that our learners face in the school system, the suspension and expulsion rates, and also the questions of power and representation. I believe strongly that at the heart of what we are dealing with here is the continued normalization of white racial frames in schooling and education. And this is very exhausting. It's also very, very exclusive, and it's damaging to all learners, not just Black students. For as long as educators continue to have this add-on approach, right, we will never get anywhere. In fact, everything is still going to be intact. We are not going to disrupt when you have the add-on, but we need to disrupt the existing colonial, the oppressive, and the exclusionary structures of schooling and education. And this means that we bring a very critical understanding to what we mean by inclusion, for example, and even equity. What do these terms mean for us? And we need to move beyond that liberal understanding of it, right? And to say inclusion is about, we have to begin anew. We have to start something from the ground, something different from the ground. I think we can't talk about Canada having a global leadership in education, standards, and resources if we don't address the systemic issues of power and whiteness that radical inclusion brings. If we truly want to empower our students, right, what we need to confront the issues of anti-Blackness, anti-Black racism, anti-indigeneity, the erasures, the Black indigenous erasures, the negations, the fact that we talk about history not in terms of the totality of the African experience. We have to name issues for what they are. We can't just dance around it like we do intellectual gymnastics. We have to call it for what it is. Name it when we see it. And this is, to me, is very, very important that we address that. Recently, Stacey Abrams in the US was talking about, you cannot be what you cannot see. This, to me, is very, very important to address the question of representation when we talk about it in the school system. The reality is that anti-racism education continues to be necessary because for far too long, it has been work which has been done in isolation by our Black and Indigenous and racialized educators, organizers, and also parents. We need everyone to be on board, not just those who are the receiving end of injustice. We need educators to be ready to do your work in the service of liberation, in the service of liberation. So I just want to conclude by highlighting this, right? I think we need to recognize the severity of issues for certain bodies. The idea that social justice for all is very, very important, but we need to look at those who are at the receiving end and target our responses. Because at the end of the day, a lot must have happened, but not a lot have changed.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that response, Dr. Day. Kathy, if I may pose this to you next, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I just also like to say thank you, and I'm just giddy with excitement being on the same panel with Dr. Day. I'm a disciple of yours, and, just being around such wisdom, and Brother Warren, with all his work in the community. And, as I reflect on the question posed, I would say that our Ontario education system, from day one, the first day our children, our precious children, enters the system, they are told that they are less than. And that message is also given to all students that pass through their halls. So the message is Black students, Indigenous students, they are inferior, they don't matter. And that narrative has to change. There are many overt and covert ways that this is done. And, it's like, I'm going to give just examples at my board, some of the findings that were there, just to highlight what's happening. And this is not unique to Peel. It's just that Peel, the spotlight is on Peel. So basically everything Dr. Day has said would explain why these conditions exist. But when you look, for example, at suspensions, you look at Black kids that are hyper surveilled, they are, or, look at interactions with the police in our schools. You look, for example, and I'm reading some stats, so I have my numbers accurately. So Black students make up 41% of the population of suspended students. They're only 7.3% of the kids. And this is for kindergarten to grade 3. Our data showed that for white students, it was 25.7%. They're only 11.8%. South Asians are 14.7%, and there are 58% of the population. So we look at how people view actions of our children. We look at how our children are treated in what we call, for example, in school review committees, where, you have a 4-year-old that would hit a kid, and they are ready to label the child as a future gang leader. So, what do you, if you label a kid from age 4 as a future gang leader, what messages are we sending to that kid? How do we treat that kid? And then why would we be surprised when we have labeled that kid to be a gang leader, right? You look, for example, at our gifted programs. So you look at who is represented in gifted programs. You look at the secondary level. We have Black students, only 2.4% of Black students are in the gifted program. They make up 10.1% of the secondary population. You look at East Asian, they make up 28.7% of the gifted program, yet they're only 4.9% at Peel. South Asians, they make up 34.2%. They are in the secondary, they're 51.7%, and white children, 20.8%, and they're only 14.2% at the Peel District School Board. We have advanced placement programs, IBT programs, SciTech programs. Some programs we have less than 10 kids, right? In that program, in the entire board. We look at programs like sports programs that have 40% of our Black children in the sports program. And yet we say it's random selection. Now, I don't understand how this could be random when everything is so skewed. You look at, because of the findings that came out, our board had made a decision this year to accept kids, once Black kids met the regional learning choices criteria, to accept them in the program. And we have other racialized communities lashing out, saying, oh, they're allowing delinquent kids. They're allowing kids that are less than. So it just shows you in a society how our children are viewed, right, in society. You look at our vocational program. We have a vocational program called the VOC2 program, which, you know, I have heard it referred to as a program to nothingness, to nowhere. We're almost 42% represented in that program. So again, the streaming, and these are not things that the data is there to support it, and we need to act and do something about it. And I don't want to leave everyone with sort of doom and gloom, but I am very positive and hopeful that going forward, things will change at the Peel District School Board. We have a new director, we're under supervision, and I hope it acts as a model, because Peel is not unique. Right. And then you have even covert, I should say, ways that we discriminate our kids in the system, this phantom systemness. But there are overt ways where teachers have just openly declared that Black children, we are lazy, we are stupid, and nothing you can do can help us. And these teachers, they're not whispering it. Right. You have, when I was going through, my efforts in dismantling anti-Black racism, in a public meeting, you have administrators challenging me. How dare I challenge a Harvard-educated lawyer when a result is provided that I think is anti-Black, right? And a process that is anti-Black. And I'm thinking, I'm not sure what's so special about a Harvard lawyer, because I think I'm pretty special and smart too. So I may not have gone to Harvard, but, it's like, how dare, what qualifies me to challenge anti-Black racism? And I think the attempts to silence people that try to bring this to the forefront is a form of anti-Black racism.
This is a very important topic, and we are in a very pivotal time. And for you, Warren, I'm actually just going to combine your thoughts with the next question on the docket, because it goes hand in hand. It says that Black community members, as we've heard from Dr. D and Kathy, Black community members, parents, and students have long protested the inequities that have contributed to the social and educational conditions in which they find themselves. Right before COVID-19, as you alluded to, Kathy, many educational institutions had the spotlight on them, and they pledged to address systemic racism and inequity in their boards. However, it seemed as though the conversation just died when the pandemic started. Now, with educators and students adjusting to this new normal, or this new way of learning, this new way of being, Warren, this question is to you. How has this affected the move towards a more equitable education system?
Okay, there really is a lack of commitment within Canada to really, address the real issues of racism. I mean, racism it's like a virus, it's like a virus that is, came out hundreds of years ago. It's spread around the world, and it's actually almost like a pandemic as well. And we see how the world has reacted to this COVID-19 pandemic that we're in. There's solutions to address it, but when it comes to racism, it's like business as usual. So there's a lot of talk about change, but I think the stats really tell this story. People are not born racist; they're taught to be racist, and these school systems really are helping, as Dr. Day had said, with a Eurocentric kind of focus, really just help to perpetuate that. We as a community have a long history of education. I mean, used to be that the leading universities in the world were in Africa. If you go back thousands of years, whether you look at in Egypt or Timbuktu, and so over time, Africa, and we have a long history in terms of education, but in recent times we rely on the public school system. So I think it's time that we look at a lot of other communities. They educate folks within their own community. They have their own schools. I mean, obviously this public school system is not working for us, but I think we should, not everybody is going to go outside of the public school system, but I think that's something that we should start looking at. We have the capacity, we have the intelligence, we have the expertise, we have great educators in our community. I think that that's something that we should be looking at doing. As far as COVID is concerned, it's kind of like it has really, increased the issues with respect to our students. So things were worse, but it's like now they're, I think, have been multiplied in terms of, the effects on our students, just in terms of, I guess, access to technology in some cases. We also have a lot of single parent households where, relying on the parents to educate the students, that can affect their outcomes. And so it's just, I think the pandemic and COVID situation has just made things worse for our students. Early on in the pandemic, we did do some outreach to some of the school districts to try and get a feel for and get some data on the effect that is having on Black students, and also reached out to the ministry, but we haven't been able to really get hold of much of that data. A lot of it has been anecdotal, and that's what we're hearing from educators, is that our students are not faring well, as many other students in this COVID situation. So those are some of my thoughts.
Thank you so much, Warren, for sharing that. And I will now like to call on Dr. Day. There seems to be that there's less room for Black students, racialized students, Indigenous students to make mistakes in comparison to their white counterparts. Students who are racialized, Black students, are more likely to be assumed to have behavioral needs or to be seen as disruptive or aggressive. Now, do these perceptions by educators allow for racial profiling of our students?
Absolutely. I think there are no two ways about that. But I think we need to focus and examine, for example, the disproportionate disparate measures that we have in the system, right? And the greater likelihood that sometimes our students are streamed into applied and this developed programs, right? I think the absence of Black, Indigenous, and racialized peoples in course materials and the curriculum, and how these create particular perceptions of our students, right? So rather than hold the school system accountable for the failure to address it, we move into pathologizing. So we criminalize, we discipline the students, right? I think there's no doubt about it. There's a clear criminalization of Black learners' behaviors in the school system. And I think while the evidence is there, research shows, when we look at the suspension and expulsion rates, right? We have research that do demonstrate that and how students are being funneled into this behavior and special education programs. There's a clear hypervisibility and also sometimes the visibility of our students in these areas. And I think we need to ask, for example, what is contributing to that? That in itself is a form of profiling our students. Certain decisions are being based on stereotypes. They are being based on certain assumptions that we have of our students. There are ways students are supposed to behave. There's a very disciplinary approach to it. So, for example, rather than teaching discipline, we enforce discipline. And that creates a problem, right? Our students don't get to be young. In fact, right from even kindergarten, they are seen as adults. So they never get to be children. And that's probably, it's a problem. One of my students has called it this process of adultification. All of a sudden, they are made into adults when they are so young, right? And I think we need to look at changing mindsets that bring these issues around. I think there are cultural cues that sometimes are misunderstood for rudeness. Students are therefore reprimanded and they are punished. Clothing sometimes becomes synonymous with crime and violence. The hoodie, the hat, we know it. We know all that, right? Sometimes when people talk about low parental involvement in schooling, and so we pathologize rather than understand what are the processes that lead to parents not getting involved. We pathologize the families, and I think this is a problem that we need to address it. To what extent, for example, do we work with community knowledge that these students and their communities have and are going to be relevant to the education for our children? Sometimes even their knowledges are not seen as valid. They're not seen as real knowledge. Language, the whole question of language. Sometimes what happens is that language is used as a tool for policing our students. And so to me, the cumulative effect of all this is what Bettina Love talks about, that spirit measuring, right? It's symbolically, it's spiritually, it's psychologically. And I think it's a problem. This profiling, right, has certain gender aspects to it. Sometimes Black male students are seen as aggressive. Black female students are seen as loud, right? And these are problems that I think we need to address because they are forms of profiling, right? It's not just the intentions that sometimes we focus on, it's the effects of these practices, right? The effects of these practices that students get disengaged, they're not interested in the system. They're not interested in the education. It's not that they don't want education. It's just that the environment is not conducive to their learning. And we have to basically address this environment that creates that. And I see that as a big problem.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Day. And I remember someone once said to me, to imagine being invited to a party where you know absolutely nobody. How many of you would actually show up, right? Yeah. And Kathy, I wanted to pose this next question to you. And it's looking at socioeconomic disadvantages, right? Which we know that this is the reality of many Black communities, right? Talking about low-income areas, we can have a whole webinar about redlining, but we're not going to get into that. Access to diverse types of schooling, like French immersion, even extracurricular activities that our students or Black students, I should say, are able to be privy to. You had mentioned the overrepresentation in sports as compared to other areas of extracurricular. Now, we know that these disadvantages have had an adverse impact on the education of Black and minority children. In this system, we call it public education. It's meant to serve the public and the members of the public. Should this be the case, and how can this be addressed systemically?
Mm-hmm. So thank you for that question. And before I actually answer it, I want to at first challenge the notion of socioeconomic disadvantage for Black students. Because, for example, in Brampton, and this is a 2016 stat, I think, that over or roughly 90% of Black families, they own their own homes. So Black families, we are not, asking for handouts. We're taxpayers. We're legally entitled to an education. We're not asking for a favor. We're only demanding what we are paying into, for the right to have our children, the humanity of our children seen by educators. So, a lot of these children that we like to peg into this social disadvantage category are actually not. What they are discriminated against. They are targeted and traumatized by an educational system that see them as less than, right? That don't value them. As Dr. Day said, they adultify our kids, right? And they marginalize them. They don't want them, they make them not feel they're disenfranchised, right? And literally, what's happening to our children is that because they have their melanin composition, is a little different than most, right? Then they're seen a certain way, right? So I think that when we look, because kids that are have a socioeconomic disadvantage are regardless of race, because that's the funny thing about finances. It doesn't discriminate, right? So they're all, people are affected negatively. So you look at, for example, cost of application fees to some of our programs. You look, for example, where are our specialized programs located, right? They're not in neighborhoods, the so-called, and another thing that they like to label our kids as like hard to serve schools. They're not hard to serve, right? We don't want to serve them, right? And then, one of the funny things as a trustee, you hear parents speak, for example, you look at COVID, so many Black children that were being excluded from school because the moment they arrive in school, they're sent to the principal's office, right? Are actually thriving online, right? And people are like, wow, they're shocked, but in a safe and caring environment. So they are showing up. Now, I know we have other kids that are struggling with online learning, but I'm just saying and that's one of the things that our board, we're going to look at the experiences of racialized kids when they were online. How did they feel about their online learning experience, right? I think when we look at what is happening to the underrepresentation of Black children in some of these programs, we have to look at the locations of them, how we disseminate and who gets tapped, right? Who do teachers see as scientists, right? Yeah. Look at the brochures we produce. If we have SciTech brochures that only show one particular, the model minority in a chemistry lab, so I don't see myself, you don't see me as a scientist swirling a beaker or a flask, right? But we are in the videos when they're promoting, we're dunking hoops. So what messages are we sending to Black children and to the other children there? I also think we have to look at who we're letting into our schools, right? And who we are hiring and onboarding, right? We have to look at staffing. And again, if kids don't see themselves reflected, well, how do you expect them to excel and aspire, right? And I think sometimes we speak of this systemness like it's a phantom, like it's a mythical entity or something. But I say this systemness that we're trying to break down is basically racist people behind it, upholding racist ideologies, racist practices. They're upholding this sort of notion of white supremacy. They are upholding how, the expectations and what they see as outcomes for our kids. Right. And I think a lot of them turn a blind eye to injustice. They uphold the status quo and they deny our Black children their human rights, because, again, it's not a favor we're asking. Right. And I think, like almost of a radical concept, like, wow, why about our teachers' colleges? Who are the people that they are admitting into teachers' colleges? Right. And how are they training these students in the teachers' colleges, right? I look at our leadership within our boards. So, our administration, our superintendents, how are they upholding the status quo? Are they, what policies are boards, first of all, implementing? And are they following up, right? Is there accountability in these processes? Those are the type of oversights that I think is necessary. And I tell parents out there that, if this is not happening, then you need to vote and make sure you have trustees at a table that will advocate for your needs and address your issues. Because systemic racism is not a phantom, it's people that do it in there. And I think the public, the parents, I think students, I think community need to be at the forefront, and they need to let their voices be heard. And it's that simple. I think the system interprets people's silence as compliance, and they don't understand that sometimes they are just worn down by the aggression, the microaggression, the macroaggressions that we have to live with daily. They're traumatized. Some of these parents were traumatized by the education system, right? And I think that it's imperative that parents, they do not let the education system deny your children the education that they're legally entitled to.
Thank you so much, Kathy. And you had a lot of salient points in there. Looking in the chat right now, there's so many people saying, amen. Yes, girl, says Kathy. What a wonderful way to word it. We are taxpayers and are entitled to an education. And that's the truth. Now, Warren, many parents and community members have called out the fact that many Black students, especially Black boys, have a high dropout rate. What can be done in school boards to help curb or address this issue?
Yes. So, a lot of it, actually, there are some studies that show that there is a lot of, unconscious or conscious bias when it comes to Black males. And that starts as early as preschool. So, they're over disciplined, throughout their education. And a lot of this, I think, is due to, again, miseducation of the teachers that helps to create these biases. So the teachers themselves need to be, properly educated to help address these biases. We also need accountability measures. So, it's like the over discipline of Black males seems to be business as usual in these school systems, and there doesn't seem to be any real accountability to address the way that Black males are disproportionately disciplined, and that also often leads to the higher dropout rates. So there real needs to be a real commitment to addressing these biases that of these educators. There needs to be measures to really hold them accountable, and also I think having a curriculum that is more inclusive, that's more reflective, that where Black males and Black students in particular will see themselves included in. This Black History Month, and it's the fact of the matter is most of the history that is seems to be pushed is starts with slavery, and that is like, it's almost like it's an iceberg. It's like the tip of the iceberg is the last 500 years, which includes slavery. If you look below the surface and you go back thousands of years, you'll see such a rich African history. Just great contributions. It was Africa. Actually, before that time, Africa was the superpower. Africa was, had the leading civilizations, but we're not taught that. Whether it's, and I'm just talking about you looking at thousands of years of Egypt. Look at Western African empires like Mali. And just great contributions in areas of math and science. You look at Mansa Musa, who they said was the richest man in history. They say by today's standards, he would be worth 400 billion. Well, that also ties into the strong African civilization that he was a part of. So, this is stuff that we're not taught about, and I think it does have a negative effect on our students not knowing this stuff, not being taught that, and being miseducated. So the miseducation really has a negative effect on our students and on the educators in the system. So I think we really need to address those matters to really help address that issue.
Thank you so much, Warren. And I love that quick history lesson you gave us, right? In terms of, many people don't know that the first universities were actually in African nations, right? Timbuktu boasted, was it 25,000 students at that time, was huge. It was huge. And many people came from Europe. Many people came from all over the world to learn at this university. And even right now, a rallying cry is beyond Black History Month, right? Beyond February, beyond just 1 month where we focus on, like you said, slavery. Let's just make it part of history, world history as we know it. Which I will tie this final question to, not final in total, but before the Q&A. Dr. Day, this is for you. Now, you were one of the main advocates for Afrocentric schools. And I still remember, I believe I was in university or teachers college when Afrocentric schools was finalized and said this is going to happen. There was almost a rip in the system where people were like, what do you mean? And others were like, yay! You were on one side or the other. And your research and study resulted in what we now know today as Afrocentric schools in Ontario. Some people argue that this isolates Black kids and deny them the opportunity to learn in a diverse learning environment. What would you say to that?
That's a very interesting question. And then there's a long history, right, of Black advocacy that ended up with the school, right? But I think it's very misleading for anyone to read the school as isolating our children, right? It's quite the opposite. So I want to rephrase it in a different way, right? Which is more isolating. When you have a classroom where the students' history, their culture, their knowledge, their experiences are not being taught. I mean, the things that Warren and Kathy have been talking about, right? When I hear Warren and Kathy speak, a part of me says, hallelujah, speaking truth to power, right? Because these are things we don't want to talk about. Why don't we have this same concern when we talk about, say, the all-girls school or the French-only schools or all-boys school? We don't have these issues being raised, right? I think we need to see where this is coming from. Look, let me use my own personal example. Growing up in Ghana, I went to school with students who look just like me, right? Now, you telling me when I came to Canada and went to school with white students, somehow I couldn't interact because I haven't been schooled with bodies that look like me. The question is not just the bodies, it's the knowledge, it's the experiences, the history that are not being taught that needs to be addressed, right? So for me, the question that it raises, right, is that we need to look at the genesis of the school. What propelled the call for the school? It was the absences, the erasures, the fact that the history is taught without looking at it as a totality of African people's experiences, right? We have African history now. People are talking about what? Let's learn how to cook and share meals. You have, and that's African history. Give me a break, right? And we need to be very, very upset about that. Integration has not guaranteed our learners' success. Just because the students are in the same classroom doesn't mean so. It's about what is being taught. So addressing the exclusions, the negations, the omissions is very, very important. And I also know that racial solidarity, as others have talked about, there are Latin Villains talk about it, will not guarantee success. But I think to me, when the student is in the classroom where their experiences matter, where their histories matter, where their cultures matter, and see teachers who look like them, they are very, very important. I keep coming back to this point. You can never be what you cannot see, right? It's so important for us to deal with it. And so to me, I think it's very, very important to see how we talk about this concern and broaden the conversation and not just be concerned about, well, they are not learning from a very inclusive. How do we define that inclusive environment? It's not just about the bodies. It's about the knowledge. It's about the histories and the experiences, as I've talked about. These are very, very important. And we have to understand the genesis of the school to be able to address this question.
Thank you so much, Dr. Day. Man, I feel like we could just sit here all night and give this a go, but I want to jump into the Q&A because, man, the chat is lighting up, the Q&A box is lighting up. There's so many questions coming at you guys, and I don't want us to run out of time. So I'm going to start with the first question with my Q&A. It's from Sonia Thomas. And sorry, before I do, if you want to ask a question live, if you want to ask our panelists a question live, please make sure you click that raise hand button so that we can ready you to hop on the mic and ask your questions. I just want to make sure to mention that before we dive in. Now, this question I'm going to pose to you, Kathy, and it's from Sonia Thomas. And she says, has there been any discussions within school boards to utilize culturally sensitive mediations in resolving conflicts, especially between BIPOC students and school staff?
And the answer to that is yes. At the Peel Board, we have started doing that now. Before they had a system, I forgot the name of it right now, something circles, right? And it was not really serving, especially our Black students well. So they are looking at a new way of mediating and having student voices be the center of any conflict and harm and repair efforts at the board. So it's sort of in the infancy planning stages.
Thank you so much for that, Kathy. And I'm going to now ask, I'm not sure who wants to take on this question. Maybe I'll say, Warren, how do we get more Black men in good paying teaching positions?
Well, I think that, it almost somewhat speaks to what Dr. Day just mentioned about, you aren't what you don't see. So I think we need to, see more black male teachers, need efforts to recruit them to talk to students about, the possible careers as teachers, have Black male students and teachers going to the schools to, talk to potential students, to potential candidates, and again, just trying to show them more role models in the field, I think, is one solution. But that's kind of what comes to mind offhand.
Thank you so much, Warren. And Dr. Day, I'm going to pose this to you. I know it was addressed to Kathy, but I'm going to pose this to you because you do teach at OISE, and OISE is a very prestigious teachers college. And it says here that it's from Dr. Isla Jarvis. It says, I read Mr. Warren's research on teachers who experienced racism in schools as teachers. I am wondering how that is handled at the building level. What is in place? It specifically says that TDSB to help teachers cope with this type of what I consider to be a breakdown or attempt to change the mindset of not only the children, but the adults who teach them. And if I may take the liberty to sort of reframe that, what can be done in this, what it seems to be a change or a drive to change the mindset of Black, be it male teachers or female teachers in the building, while teaching Black students? What can be done, especially for the teacher candidates coming out of teachers college?
Well, I think it comes to the question about what educators learn as part of their own education, right? So you want, for example, the faculties of education to teach critically these issues about race, gender, class, and sexuality. You want anti-Black racism to be a key part or a core component of teacher training and education, because you cannot talk about education today, which is anything but anti-racist, anti-sexist, anti-homophobic, right? So how we prepare our teachers become very, very critical. Even teaching Blackness, and what it requires to teach Blackness, so that Blackness just simply is not taught in a way that is in a negative way, in a way that we don't look at it in terms of the resistance, the struggles. These are very, very important. And I think, to me, right, what this also brings to the fore is how even when we raise these issues, there's a pushback. So, for example, you hear people talk about, we need to teach anti-Black racism. We need to teach about Blackness. We need to teach about anti-Blackness. And then somebody would say, well, we need to do something different. So when people have anti-Black racism courses being introduced, they'll get a pushback. And the pushback is that, oh, it's not necessary. It should be anti-racism in general for everyone, right? And the dialogue revolves around questions of apathy, and nothing gets done when it comes to Black liberation, right? So I think these are very, very important issues that have to be addressed. What is in the curriculum? How we prepare our teachers? How we ground and center the issues of the day? Because at the end of the day, right, we cannot prepare the teacher for the classroom and not ground the teacher in these issues we have been talking about. We are doing a disservice to our own learning, we are doing a disservice to our communities, and we are doing a disservice to our students when we fail to do that, right? So it's about how we critically engage the issues of the day and prepare teachers so that teachers will work with that knowledge when they get into their classroom. We don't need to teach about these issues when you have Black bodies in the class. You need to teach these issues, period, to all learners, because there are some students who feel that the whole world is about them, right? And then there's this idea where people will think, oh, your reality is the only reality we're talking about, rather than look at the complexity of issues for everyone and how we find ourselves connected with that. Our histories are connected. And the way we can understand that connection of our history is that we ground the learners in their respective identities, cultures, histories, and knowledges.
Thank you so much, Dr. Day. My children are always not comfortable on how Blackness is being discussed. They feel less of a Canadian during these discussions, and they always ask me, why are we asking to be included in school in the system? Are we not Canadian like others? And this, they asked me, can we stop talking about it and just allow everyone to flow in life? If you may tie what you wanted to say to that question, because you have the PhD of Mommy University. Help us out here.
Yeah, no problem. So I just wanted to just add something to what Dr. Day said. And, I firmly believe that I'm not in the changing hearts and minds business. I think as a school boards, we should have accountability measures. So you come into our school system and you traumatize our children, you don't have high expectations for our children. Well, our schools should not be a safe haven for people like you. And with concrete accountability measures, that's how we weed them out. And so our staff need to know these are the expectations. And if you continue to behave in a certain way, then you go. I think, a lot of times people too, they would tell you, but you have to go slow to go fast, or, it's trauma. So why are we centering whiteness in our issues when we have Black children that are suffering? And I look at the greatest social disruptor of all times. Jesus did not go slow to go fast. You were either with him or he left you behind. Pick up your car and you follow me. That's it. So this is the direction we are going. And you know what? If you don't understand that Black children are worthy of education, well, just retire or go, resign, find another job, right? And I think it's almost like we have to be unapologetic in our stance. And I think also, I think of my own journey when we started telling stories of what was happening. And it was like, this is a one-off. They're not a one-off. And even if it happens one time, it's one time too many. And it's, it's almost what I call, it got to the point of what I call pain porn. Black people came, time after time, meeting after meeting, pouring out their pain. And, we just sat there stoically listening to it, and it didn't move them. It's like they didn't see the humanity in our kids. And I think we're now at a juncture where this is how we are going to operate as a board. And if you are not for it, then off you go. This should not be a safe haven for you. And to answer the question with regards to, in history, like for example, I always look at Black history, right? And as Dr. Day said, people are cooking, people are talking about Rosa Parks, Obama, and we're in Canada, and we have so many Canadians. And I think it's so anti-Black and so offensive to be looking to what I call the top 5 people. And I'm not negating the accomplishments of Obama, and Martin Luther King. And these are wonderful, amazing people who did amazing things. But we have amazing people right here in Canada that are contributing to and making significant changes in Canada. And I think they need to be acknowledged. A lot of times, when you see how Black people are portrayed, we're either portrayed as slaves, we're either portrayed as illiterate immigrants, refugees, right? And we are people contributing and making huge changes. Just look at the guest that's going to be on next week. Jean Augustine, we have a school named after her. The work, she came here from Grenada, the work she's done. Look at Patricia and Moses as a powerhouse couple. There are many, many people doing, Dr. Day, your work, speaks leaps and bounds, doing amazing things. And then why are we talking about Rosa Parks when we have Viola Desmond, right? And I just think that we have to start telling our own stories. And there's an African proverb that talks about, until lions start being historians or get their own historians, the story of the hunt will always favor the hunter. And now I think it's about time that we as lions roar, and we have to be unapologetic in our stance, because if not, we look at, for example, what's going on in the Peel and that report. You have the Stephen Lewis report was 30 years ago. My husband emigrated here as an immigrant, and I went to school in Jamaica, and I look at his experience as a 13-year-old boy. He's Trinidadian, and he has the singy-songy accent, so they put him in a special ed class. So we have to look, and then when does that stop? And this was, I speak like Warren, his mom is a great mentor of mine. And you look at her experience as a kid, like in the 50s, getting an education in this country, and nothing has changed. So at some point, we have to say enough is enough, and start demanding what we're legally entitled to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathy. In 30 seconds or less, what would racial equality look like in our education system today?
The stats are so disproportionate. So I think when we have stats in terms of achievement, when we look at things like, discipline, just the different areas, special ed, gifted, when we look at a lot of these areas where the stats are so disproportionate, I think when we see, and also in terms of the curriculum, when the curriculum is more inclusive and reflective and equal, I think that those could be some measures of equality.
Thank you so much, Warren. What about you, Kathy?
When we have our students having equity of outcomes in graduation rates, for example, when their Black students and Indigenous students' graduation rates are on par with their peers, when they're reflected in academic programs, when they're in pathways that can lead to post-secondary opportunities, I think when our staff reflects the students that they teach, when teachers' colleges start turning out staff that looks like the population that they're serving. I think when school board policies are equitable and they are steeped in, and everything is, they check it based on like, and they use an anti-oppressive lens, they look at colonialism, anti-Black racism, anti-Indigenous racism. I think when we start to see, these changes, then I would start to think we have hopes, and I am hopeful. I know sometimes I sound like full of woe, but I'm really excited about the future because I think right now we have the policies in place. We have an amazing leader at our school board, and I'm hoping that Peel will serve as a model, and it would just be like a virus and infect all boards. And, we will dismantle anti-Black racism, and don't go slow to go fast. We are charging full speed ahead.
The lions that we are. Thank you so much, Kathy. And Dr. Day, to you.
Yes, just building on that, I think to me, racial equity is not about performance, right? It's not about celebration. It's about actually doing something to produce concrete results. It's about addressing the things that Kathy was talking about, questions of power, knowledge, representation in the curriculum. It's also about dealing with anti-racism, anti-Blackness, and anti-Black racism. And then undoing white privilege. Undoing white privilege. That to me is about racial equity, undoing white privilege and white supremacy, right? And finally, it's also having that anti-colonial mindset, right? There's a Black feminist that talks about unchaining our minds. We need to unchain our minds. And that's that anti-colonial mindset. Because liberation, Black liberation can only happen if we unchain our minds. Thank you.
Now, we talked about the fact that, Kathy, you said it so well. The education system is not like, Phantom of the Opera. It's not this ghost in the crevices that we can't see or we don't know. It starts with us. It is us, our voice, what we ask for, what we look for, what we demand. If you can give 30 seconds or less again, if you can give an advice to a parent, community members, or even just people who are thinking, you know what, this is, like you said, this is traumatic. This is overwhelming. I've been through it. I don't want to go through it again. What advice would you give to community members, to parents, to just people to help mobilize us, to help us, get that fire underneath us to really start roaring? I love how you said it, roaring like the lions we are, keeping our own history.
Well, I think the first step that everyone should do immediately as you leave this webinar is find out who your school board trustee is. Call them up and get to know your school board trustee. I think also parents need to mobilize together. So at board meetings, bring your children. They can't turn you away with your children. They can color in their coloring book if you have no one to leave them with. But I think what's happening now is so important and too important to leave to the will of other people. I think you can even form like a little group. So 1 week I will go to the meeting, the next meeting, another parent goes, and they can keep the kids, find way, because the system sees the absence of our Black bodies as consent and liberty to do what they want with our children. So I think it's really crucial to get involved. There are many groups like Parents Advocacy Peel, Parents of Black Children, VACA. So find online, go and visit your school board's website, get involved, right? If you don't have internet or you're not say very tech savvy, speak to people. There's a lot of resources out there, but it's very important to get involved because our children are too important to leave to a system or to people that don't value them.
Thank you so much, Kathy. And Warren, I'll throw this to you as the same question to you, and especially in terms of interactions with school system, with teachers, with parent-teacher interview. That's another whole discussion we can have, particularly in the Black community. What are some advice you would give?
Yeah, so I think that there's been a long history of these school districts, streaming our children into away from academic or advanced, so it's very important as parents that we second guess the recommendations of whether it's the teacher or the guidance or whoever. It's very important to get involved, go in to see the teachers, get involved with your students schooling, and also to, as Kathy said, look at joining with other parents, look at joining groups, and also I'd say looking at educating your children, because they are so bombarded with Eurocentric education. Look at educating them in terms of their real history. Definitely, Canadian history is important, but again, that's the tip of the iceberg. I think there's so much also rich history that we're not taught, and that we need to focus more on to really know our real history, to really know where we come from, and that will help to, I think, empower us and empower our children. So that's my 30-second quick answer.
You did it so well. You did it so well, Warren. Dr. Day, what about you? What your thoughts to really light that fire underneath us, because the time for change is now.
Yeah. No, 3 quick points, and actually they build on Warren and Kathy's point. I think, to me, education is too important to be left in the hands of teachers and schools alone. I think we need to play our role even when certain things are not being done. Secondly, resistance has been part of our history, and we cannot afford to betray our ancestors if we don't embark on resistance. Resistance is the key to our own decolonization, right? So we cannot betray our ancestors. And lastly, there's an African saying that we all say it all the time: it takes a village to raise a child. But I don't think we understand what it means. I honestly don't think so. What it means is that you need to have a village in the first place to be able to raise a child, right? That's what it means. So we must create villages where we are. And that means our community must come together and create villages. That's what it takes a village to raise a child means. You must have a village in the first place. Before we can succeed in whatever we want to do, we must have this village. We must have the community. We must come together. And our community is a community of differences, structured along the lines of ethnicity, gender, class, sexuality, and so forth. But we need to come together in order to be able to raise that child. We need that village. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Day. Man, poetic snaps to that. It takes a village to raise a child, but first we must have a village. I need to put that on a t-shirt. But thank you so much to our panelists tonight. I really don't want you to go, but our time is up. Thank you for making the time to speak so real, so authentically, and so raw with us. This was a powerful discussion. Without further ado, I just want to say thank you all for an amazing time of discussion. Don't leave yet, as we have 2 other videos for you to watch. I will not be coming back on after those videos, so I just want to take the time to say have a wonderful evening, and thank you so much for your time.
On Tuesday, February 16th, join us for a celebration like no other on 25 years of Black history, then, now, and the future. Featuring a keynote address by Dr. Maulana Karenga, creator of the Pan-African holiday, Kwanzaa, and Professor and Chair, Department of Africana Studies, California State University, Long Beach. Panel discussion with the Honorable Dr. Jean Augustine, former Cabinet Minister and first Black woman elected to the Parliament of Canada. Dr. Julius Garvey, vascular surgeon and son of the legendary Marcus Mosiah Garvey, and the Honorable Tony Ince, Minister of the Public Service Commission and African Nova Scotian Affairs. Moderator Irene Moore Davis, historian, author, and president of the Essex County Black Historical Research Society. Register at eventbrite.ca. This is part of the Community Resilience Program, presented by the Transformation Institute for Leadership and Innovation and other partners. Afro Global Television is a global super channel that transforms the destiny of people of African descent through programming that informs, empowers, entertains, and uplifts. The mission of Afro Global is to showcase the best of Africa and the diaspora. Watch Afro Global Television on Rogers Cable, Bell 5, TELUS, and Eastlink.
In 2008, we felt that it was important to start a program to reach out to young people in our community because there was a lot of violence and there was just so much going on that was not positive about Black youth or youth in sort of disadvantaged neighborhoods. So we started a crossover mentorship program to reach out to these young people, to bring people that look like them, to share their experiences with them, to let them know that, you know, they're not alone in whatever they're going through, that somebody else has probably gone through the same experience. And like Maya Angelou said, when you learn, teach. When you get, give. And that's what the program is all about.
If we don't catch them early, they could be falling into the wrong hands or into the tracks that we don't want them to be. They have to be contributing to the society, not the other way.
It's important to have a mentorship program like this in the community because a lot of the time people are focused on their own lives and a lot of the time it's very separate. This actually lets people come together and learn from each other.
Kids nowadays, I think they spend too much time on the devices. They don't talk enough. Everything is, a machine. And the ability to communicate, we have to go out and work and deal with other people. So I think any interaction where they have to learn to deal with other people, going to school and doing activities that they enjoy doing, I think you're gonna have a lot of success, but it's also a great teaching tool.
See, I can't afford to sleep till 7 o'clock, and people think you do, but discipline is important.
This mentorship program is really very significant simply because it ensures that our young people, our youth, who are the future of this country, it's obvious, need to be able to participate. We have for them to open up the system more and make it equitable and for them to easier able to access that field of employment and education. What the Institute is doing along with the program is to ensure that students and young people can reach their potential.
It gives them career coaching where they can learn the difference between a job and the difference between a career, knowing that a career is something that's more long-term versus a job is something that you just may do to pay the bills, to get by. And also during that transition from being a youth to an adult, which is very key and it's an essential part of growing up. And also it provides them with mentors that can give them not only the guidance, but give them the tools they need to be successful in life.
Hi, my name is Baladi Ajamali, and I was part of the Rio 2016 4x1 team with Andre DeGrasse. We won a bronze medal last year, and I was also part of the crossover mentorship program in 2008. Being a part of that program has changed my life and made me a better person today. So I challenge you to come and join this program.